Let's do it. Again, it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out for the program today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's great to meet you as well.
Absolutely. So let's begin our journey with this. I think the pandemic is something that we haven't talked about as much, maybe because there was so much that was going on. But I want to dive into that. Six
Yeah.
years ago, it changed everything. How did you get through that era, and how has it influenced the way that you work and live today?
Great question, and a question that could get me in a lot of trouble. so, uh, my wife and I, we were pastoring Connections Vineyard Church at the time. And so it was a church here in Tucson. And I was one of the few churches that refused to close my doors. And we also had a food pantry that we had ministry out of the church. And pretty much all of the food pantries, except for three in Tucson, shut down. We were one of the ones that was still open. And we had people who were telling us that they took 3 and 4 bus, you know, exchanges to get to our food pantry just so they could get some food. We started a delivery service where we would go out even out to the reservation to bring people food and medicine and supplies. And the members of our church took up a collection in case I got arrested because they were afraid that I was going to get arrested. And we have a board. The church had a board, and the board said, no, we need to shut down. So I shut down. I think it was for like 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks at the most. And then I said, that's it. We're not shutting down anymore.
Yeah.
And so we were one of the few churches that were still open. And so we had a lot of people who would come. And I would tell people, I don't get it. Why in this time where people are fearful, concerned, and need to have a higher faith-based anything that they could trust in and believe in, and a place where they could go and felt seen and heard still. And people who were the most vulnerable were people who might have been drug addicts, because our church was in the inner city part of Tucson, and so we served a lot of homeless, a lot of drug addicts, a lot of people of limited means. And so at the time when these people needed help the most and were fearful the most, we shut down the one thing we told them was greater than their circumstances of the moment,
Hmm.
and said, nope, sorry, man is in control, not God. And that just did not set okay with me. And so a lot of people were frustrated and angry with that and said I was part of the problem, and that could be the case. But
Good for you for doing that, because that time was really confusing, and I think it's hurt a lot of people now. That's the reason why I asked this question, especially the younger people, and especially the people that needed it the most. Now that we look back on it, 2020, the hindsight of 2020, there were so many things that were contradictory and weird. So you get masked up, you get all ready to go into a restaurant, and you walk in and take your mask off, and while you're ingesting fluids and particles of food, it's going to come out in an exponential way. Like, what logic model was going on at that time? And at the end of the day, this was a flying virus. The chance of all of us getting it at least once was probably 99%, and we were told that.
Oh, absolutely. It was just I said from the beginning the recommended cure is worse than the problem. And being an engineer, I was a nuke engineer in the Navy, and I do, because we didn't get paid for our ministry, we just rolled it all back in. So I still had my job at doing consulting work to the power plants. And people would ask me, well, how has it changed your life? I was like, what do you mean? Power plants still have to operate. You want to see a real problem? Let the power plant shut down and people don't have air conditioning or can't watch their Netflix. So I would be going, sometimes I was the only person on the plane. I was maybe the only person at the hotel, but it was interesting. You go to different parts of the country, and like I go to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and it was shut down. It was like a ghost town. Nobody was there. Everybody was indoors and all this kind of stuff. Even to go through the drive-through at McDonald's, like you had to wear a mask and all this kind of stuff. Then I'd go to Kingman, Arizona, and was no change whatsoever. It
Yeah.
was life was going on. I'd be like, what's different here? And they're like, we're a cowboy town. We don't buy that crap. It was
Yeah.
so funny. I was
Yeah.
like, yeah. But I would ask we've got family and friends, and they first, they couldn't get the paper masks anymore, so they went to the cloth masks. And so I'd ask them, I was like, so how often do you wash your cloth mask? And they're like, I don't know, maybe a couple weeks ago. And I'm like, so let's see. You're worried about a virus, yet you're breathing all of this stuff, from inside you, the carbon monoxide, all of your germs, everything, you're sneezing and all that kind of stuff into this mask. You're not washing it and you're breathing it all back in.
Uh-huh. Yep.
That's really gigantic.
Uh-huh.
It was just they people didn't quite get it and understand it. And then the business that my wife and I own, Citywide Facility Solutions of Southern Arizona, one of the things we do with the business is hydrostatic disinfectant. So it's using chemistry, and you hydrostatically place a charge on it, and then you can spray it, and then it gets everywhere and it kills the bacteria. And so our revenue skyrocketed from that, which was good. But again, just people, me, my background is nuclear engineering, and what I do as a consulting world involves a lot of chemistry. So I have a lot of chemi knowledge. And I was just shaking my head. I'm like, people, you have no understanding of
Yeah.
what's really going on here.
Uh-huh. No, you don't. So you
No.
have an eclectic palette of professions and your journey's been very interesting. But if we hone in on today, I'm going to put you in front of 12-year-olds at career day. And one of the kids in the back of the room wants to know what you do for a living. How do you synthesize your life to make sense to their brains?
Yes. So usually what I would tell them is like, so do you go to a doctor? Has your mom ever brought you or dad ever brought you to your doctor so you can have a checkup and make sure you're doing okay and everything? Yeah, yeah. And so the doctor gives you recommendations about what you should eat and how much exercise you should get and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Well, that's what I do in the industry world. I help different businesses and particularly power plant. So I come in and I'm the doctor for them. I do an assessment. I say, here's what you're doing right. Here's what you're doing wrong. And here's how you can benefit yourself by making these simple changes. And just like when you go to the doctor, you leave the doctor, you can either do what the doctor tells you or not do what the doctor tells you, but your dad's or mom still has to pay the doctor. When I leave, they either do what I tell them to or not do what I tell them to, but they still have to pay me.
Yep. So what did you want to be when you were a kid? What was your dream job?
Ninja. Oh, that's my wife in the background going, a ninja.
Good. I love it.
Growing up, I was really into sports. I wanted to be a professional baseball or football player. I love to tell everybody. I almost got drafted right out of college into the pros for football. I was a quarterback, and there was just one little thing that kept me from getting drafted straight out of high school to the pros. And so people will ask me, well, what was that one little thing? A complete lack of ability to be at that level. But hey, other than that,
You were there. You
I
were
was there.
totally there.
I played quarterback in high school at 4'11" my freshman year. I was a short guy. And so I grew from 4'11", probably 4 foot, 5 foot. Between my junior and senior year, I grew 8 inches.
You know what? I did the same thing. That's so weird. I've never heard anybody talk about that. I was 4'11" until my junior year, and I popped up. I actually went to a doctor because they were concerned, and the doctor was as tall as me, and I was like, "What are you going to tell me? Like, what?" I want Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to walk through the door and be like, "It's going to be okay, kid. We're going to play horse and everything's fine. I'll let you win." Like I needed something like that, but it's weird because I was a runner at the time, so I could
Yep.
have never ventured out and done that. So did you play sports your whole life and have oh, so you had the acumen going in.
Yeah, my high school quarterback, my high school coach, excuse me, told me, said, Dave, you're a dang good mediocre. He didn't use the word dang. He used another word, mediocre, and you're always going to be a dang good mediocre. He said, because you rely on your natural ability and you don't put in the extra effort. If you'd put in the extra effort, you'd be really good. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense.
So, talk to me a little bit about your journey's been interesting. Before that, take me back to the early part of your childhood. What were the foundational elements you talked about being a military brat? What did you witness that's been a part of your professional mix of success and acumen that you've done throughout your career? What happened? How did this happen?
So great question. There's a couple of points in my life which were pivotal points. And like I said, one of them was my dad was overseas for the military. We were at Shilling Manor Air Force Base, a Waiting Wives Home base in Salina, Kansas. And so there was me, my brother, and my two sisters and my mom. And so we had a paper route where we delivered newspapers to all of the base. And so every morning, my mom would get up and she would take either me and my older brother or me and my older sister, and one of us would stay back with my younger sister, who was only like 3 or 4 at the time. And then we would get up every morning and we'd go deliver the newspapers to the whole base. She'd drive and drop us off, and we'd run, deliver papers, and she'd pick us up at the next spot. I hated getting up. So I would always, pretend to be sick so I could be the one stay at home with my little sister. And one time my mom said to me, and I was in probably sixth grade at the time, she said, David, she said, I'm tired of you pretending to be sick. She said, let me ask you a question. Have you ever seen your mom be sick? And I thought about it and I said, no, I never really have. And she said, that's because if I let myself be sick, this family would stop. So she said, being sick is all in your head. Yes, you're going to feel bad, but you can choose to, maneuver through it, or you can choose to let it overtake you. She said, I'm tired of you, letting it overtake you. You need to step up because this family needs your help. And I was like, wow, okay. So that really impacted me. And from that day forward, it started to change my perspective about, okay, it's about whether you choose to let it overcome you or whether you choose to overcome it. And so that really kind of started to shape my mentality. And then so from there, the challenges became okay, something you could overcome. You didn't have to let it get you. And I remember when I was in high school, there was two different scenarios, situations that really impacted me. And one person was always complaining, was on the team, and said to me, it's like, I broke my leg and my leg never got healed properly. And so now I always have to play with that handicap because I have a bum leg. And so they let that define them. And then we had a guy who had only one leg and played linebacker, and he didn't let anything stop him. And he would hop around that field fierce as could be. And so it was the contrast between the two and which way were you going to go. And so many people let their circumstances of the moment define them instead of saying, okay, this is the reality, but I can overcome it. And so that really kind of shaped my mindset going forward.
That's amazing. So I got to ask you, you mentioned Wichita before, and I'm a big fan of the White Castle world, and that was the first one. In Salina, they had the Cozy Inn. Was that around? Do you remember it?
Yes. Yes. Yep.
I went the first time I went there was in 2019 after I got married. We were going to our honeymoon in Manitou Springs, Colorado, and it took us months to get that onion smell out of the car. It was wonderful. It was the best thing in the world. So
Yes.
it was great. So, the one thing there's a lot of things that are inspiring about your story, but talking about what you did during COVID and servicing people, and obviously faith is a big part of what you do in your life.
Yes.
When especially here in the Midwest, when you grow up in the Bible Belt, it's like theology becomes a part of your DNA because that's just the way life is. But as you kind of venture out and start developing your own consciousness, you have these moments where you realize that there's a God, there's a benevolent force that's around us, and it's real. When did you realize for yourself, as you as an individual, that theology was real, God was real, a sign? Did you have that moment?
I did. So I grew up Catholic, and we were very powerful seeing We went every Christmas and every Easter. And but growing up Catholic, you would look, and at least for me, and I would sit, kneel, sit, stand, kneel, sit, stand, and you would say the same prayers. And I would see everybody doing this, but there was no recognition in their eyes. It was
Uh-huh.
just rote memorization. So especially when I got into the military, I would study every religion there was, trying to figure out there's got to be a reality to this. There's got to be something to it. So I studied, Christianity, Buddhism, Muhammad, Islam, Confucianism, every ism there ever was. And so I kind of came up with the concept of Deivism. You know what deism is? What a deist is? So a deist is somebody who believes that there is a God, but God is a detached God, and he set up the world like a fine watchmaker sets up a watch, and he said, "Here you have everything to make it work," and then he lets the watch run, and he's a detached God. So I kind of came up with that kind of concept, bought into that, but with a little bit of twist of here's how I think it should be. So I called it Davism. It was the religion of Dave,
Yeah.
and but I was always searching. And then my wife and I at the time, we were married. We were living in Mesa, Arizona. I was working at Palo Verde Nuclear Generating Station, and I got a job transfer up into the Tri Cities up in Washington to do some work at WNP2, which is the nuke plant up there. And so my wife and kids went back to New Hampshire to stay with their mom while I moved up, try to find a place to live, and we were selling our house in New Hampshire in Mesa. And so the house had been on the market for about 3 months. We hadn't got any offers, and I was missing my family. I wanted them to come out, so I prayed, "All right, God, let my house sell for a profit." No, I didn't say for a profit. I said, let my house sell and I can bring my kids up to me, my family up to me, and we'll start going to church like we're supposed to. And so I learned a couple valuable lessons. One, God is real. Two, pray specifically. Three, don't make deals with God. Um, and so that day, it was March 15th, I got an offer for my house, but it was for $5,000 less than I owed on it. And I was like, okay, God, joke's on me. I get it. Okay. So if this is really you, let it close by the end of March and I'll believe that it's you. So I went back to the, retail, to the, salesperson. And I said, okay, I'll accept the offer and pay the guy $5,000, upon closing, because it was, I had to pay that off. If it will close within 30 by March 30th, so 15 days. And the realtor said, there's no way that's going to happen. He's still got to close on his house. He's got to get the bank approval, blah, blah, blah. I said, that's the only way it's going to do it. That's the only way I'll approve it. He goes, okay. Well, lo and behold, it happened. On March 30th, I wrote a check for $5,000 and the house sold. So I learned, pray specifically. I should have said, God, let my house sell for a profit. and, but anyway, we went to Walla Walla, Washington, and we brought my family out and we started going to church. And I was like, okay, I was raised Catholic, but I don't want to go to the Catholic Church. But I don't really know any of the other religions, even though I studied them. So we decided to go Catholic Light, and that's Episcopal. So we started to go to the Episcopal Church. And the church we went to at the time, the pastor there, the priest there, had just started a service which he was having in the great room because he realized some people were reluctant to go into the sanctuary. So this was the function room, and he would have round tables set up, and he called his church Connections, and he would have breakfast served, and he would have things for the kids to do at the tables with the families, and he would let the people interrupt him during the service, during the message, to ask questions. So the first Sunday we're there, he's giving a message on the church, and he asked the question, can anybody tell me what the church is? So being the learned guy I was, studying all these different religions, I raised my hand and I said, yes, the church is a particular governing body of a particular religious doctrine. And he was like, yes, but, and he went on to explain how the church was the body of Christ. Well, anyway, so I got engaged with him, and we started, me and my wife started going to a small group. And it was kind of like my opportunity to just have an interrogation. So it was like, here was like 7 or 8 other people who were in the group, and I was here and I was asking questions and they were firing answers, and it was all here, but it wasn't here yet. And so I would pray, God, let it travel the 11 inches from my head to my heart. Let me truly get what this is all about. And so about 6 months later, I was driving from Walla Walla, Washington to Seattle, Washington, which is about a 5-hour drive. And about an hour out, I heard this audible voice say, are you ready? And I'm like, what? Is the radio on? No, the radio's not on. And I hear this voice again, are you ready? And it's an audible voice. And I'm looking around to see if somebody's got a truck with a loudspeaker or something. And I'm like, what the heck? And then I hear it again. Are you ready? This is what you've been praying for. Will you give me control? And I, what? Will you give me control? And so I said, all right, Lord, I'll give you control. So for the first time in my life, I let go and said, I will surrender control to you. And then for the next hour, I do not, yeah, I woke up basically an hour later. I was down the road an hour later. I don't know how I got there. It was just an hour of being just filled with the Holy Spirit, tears flowing, electric shock, just an overwhelming sense of peace and calmness. And then I woke up an hour later and I'm like, oh my gosh, what just happened? And then it was like you start to doubt. And you're like, okay, God, was that really you, or was that just bad pizza from last night or something? And so I said, okay, God, if that was really you, when I go to church this Sunday, because I was doing a study in Ephesians, let the priest be teaching on the book of Ephesians. Then I'll know it's you. And so I went to church that Sunday with great anticipation. And lo and behold, the priest was not talking on Ephesians. So I said, okay, God, guess it was bad pizza. But as I'm walking out into the parking lot with my family, this little old lady comes up to me, never saw her before, never saw her again. She comes up to me and she goes, I don't know who you are. I just know I'm supposed to give you this book. And she gave me a book, and it was a book called He Who, oh, I've got it here somewhere. I've got to find it. He who thinks must believe.
Yeah.
And it was a book on Ephesians. It was
Wow.
a book all about Ephesians. And it was all from the point of this scientist guy who was like, if you're a person who thinks and you're trying to realistically have a thought process of how all this makes sense, you must believe after you've read this. And it was a study in Ephesians. And I was like, okay, God. And so that was the journey where God started to take me to break me down piece by piece. And there's a lot of different other events that happened after that, but to finally get me to the point where I was in total surrender to Him.
Wow, that's amazing. So, who's been the inspirational force for you in your life that's allowed you to navigate to where you're at today? A hero, an inspiration.
Obviously, it'd be Christ. It would be the personal relationship with Christ. But I've had a couple of people who have really kind of mentored me in different ways that allowed me to be okay with who I am. And one of them, even though she's sitting here right now, is my current wife, Trina. Trina was the first relationship I had where I felt I could be who I was with it being okay. Most of my relationships that I had before that, I felt I had to curb who I was to be acceptable. And Trina was the first person that I had a relationship with who would say, okay, I can see where you're coming from, and I can see my part in this, and I can see where our disagreements are, and I can own my part. So I didn't feel like I had to curb or alter who I was to be acceptable.
So, what is the energy for you every day to do all of these things at a high level from, your work to, influencing and helping others? There's a lot on your shoulders, your soul, your family. What is that energy for you every day to do it at a high level?
That's a great question. And I tell everybody, and I tell my wife, Trina, if it wasn't for my family, I'd be a bum on a motorcycle. And what I mean by that is there's something inside of me that has a desire and a need to make sure the people that God has placed in my care are taken care of. And one of the things that really broke me was my kid's mom. We were married for 16 years, and she wound up having an affair with the worship leader at the church. And it kind of really broke the church, broke relationships, broke trust. And I wound up, it was something in my life that I couldn't control. And I wound up in a mental institution because I had a mental breakdown, and it just really my at the time she was 6 years old. My 6-year-old daughter found me in a fetal position on the floor, and so my kid's mom, she called her mom. They called the paramedics. They brought me to the hospital, and there wasn't anything physically wrong. And they said, you need, you're suffering from severe depression and stuff. So I admitted myself to Hampstead Hospital, which was a mental facility in New Hampshire. And I was there for about 3 months. And at first they had me on suicide watch because they were afraid, so they took away my razor, my belt, my shoelaces, all that kind of stuff. But it gave me time to process. They gave me some medication which got my chemistry balanced out. And then after about 3 months, I came out and I was working with two therapists. One was a secular therapist who was, taking me for regular therapy, and one was a pastor who had lost his church because his wife had an affair with one of the parishioners, and so he now had a ministry where he counseled men who were victims of affairs. So I was seeing both of these, and the secular therapist gave me this book to read called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And so I read the book. And if you've ever read the book, I don't know if you like it or not. It's a book, in my opinion, from the pit of hell. And because it says it's all about you. It says you can't change the past, you can't change the future. All you can deal with is the now. So you need to take care of you so you can be the best you can be. And so I went to the secular therapist after I read it. And I said, I read your book, all of it, and it's beautiful in its simplicity, but this is the last day you and I will speak with each other. And he's like, why? I said, Jesse, Jory, and Emery. And he looked at me, he said, who's Jesse, Jory, and Emery? I said, the fact that you don't know that is the fact that we'll never speak to each other again. They're my three kids. And this book is all about me, all about self. And it negates the fact that every action and every reaction I have impacts the lives of Jesse, Jory, and Emery. So my focus needs to be on them, not myself. And so that again started, God had broken me, started to shift me to get the focus off myself to see these are the people I brought into your life. It's not about you. It's about having that outward focus so you can be Christ to them. You can be who you're supposed to be to them. At the same time, I had been praying every day in my prayer closet, God, reconcile my family. You are a God who ordains family. You are a God who orchestrates family. You are a God who believes in family. And I know that you're big enough to reconcile mine. And I would pray that daily. And then I heard clearly in my prayer closet, no, I'm not going to reconcile your family. I'm going to turn her over to the desires of her heart. So this was all happening at the same time. So I got pissed at God. And I was like, screw you. And so I had a session with a pastor, who was also counseling me because he had lost his church because his wife had an affair with a parishioner. So I had a session with him that Tuesday. So I drove to the session and I was talking with him and I explained to him what I'd heard in my prayer closet. And he goes, I'll tell you what. And this is what I said to him. I said, I'll tell you what, if this is what God wants of me, I'll choose to lose on my own terms than win on his. And he looked at me and he said, you're denying God? I said, I'm not denying God. I know exactly who God is. I've heard God's audible voice. He's worked in my life. I've served God. He's blessed me in many ways. I know exactly who God is. I'm not denying him. What I'm saying is if this is what he's asking of me, it's too much. I'll choose to go to hell before I go to heaven. And he looked at me and he said, do you realize how arrogant that is, Dave? And that's what it took to finally break me. I was like, oh man. So I dropped to my knees. I was in tears and I was like, okay, God, I don't get it. I don't like it. I don't understand it. I wish you would have tried a different way. And I'm sure you did. And I was just too arrogant and pigheaded to see it. But you're God, I'm not. So do what you need to do. Build me back up to who you need to be. But I let go of everything. I got no more pride. I got no more ego. It's about you. Make me who you need to be. And so that was the first step in him slowly building me back up to be used by him for his purpose and his glory, to where I wasn't taking credit for of it and saying, see what I did. This is all about what God did.
So at this point right now in your life, David, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, clients, everyone that knows you in different circles, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I, oh, my wife is shaking her head.
Uh-oh.
Good question. I'd like to know the answer.
She wants to know the answer. I would like to think they would say David is a person who puts others first, who serves God no matter the cost, and takes the responsibility for his own actions, whether good or bad, leaving the outcome up to God. And I would like to think that's what they think of me. And when they look at me, I would like to think they see somebody they can trust in, lean on, and who has helped them and benefited them without asking for anything in return.
Well said. So I got to know, you have an adventurous spirit. If you could get into a time machine and go back in time and see one event in human history, where are you going to go? It won't create a weird Back to the Future tear in time. You just got to go see it and you got to come
Yep.
back.
Yeah, there are actually two that I would like to.
Okay.
One would obviously be the crucifixion of Christ. I would love to be there and see that for myself and experience that for myself. The other one is I would like to go back to the OK Corral, the gunfight at the OK Corral. Because
Okay.
if you've ever been to the OK Corral in Tombstone, I like history, and Tombstone's only a 45-minute drive from here. And the original corral is there. The town is still almost the same it was. They call it the town Too Tough to Die. But you go to the corral and you realize there was 6 people. Actually, there were 8 people who were about 6 feet apart from each other shooting, and nobody died. I'm
Yeah,
like,
right.
they could be some of
Right.
the worst shots in the world.
And if you could be there with an iPhone in slow-mo and see how those bullets flew.
I'm like, these are like the worst guns or the
Yeah,
worst shots. I'm like, you
that's
know,
amazing. It is. It's like other things in history. Like, how did that happen? You know,
yeah.
because they should have all fallen down. It should have
They
been
should
over
have
with.
all, yeah. But I was like, okay.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to dig into your world, any of the good business, anything that's going on, where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah. So we have a website, Ripple of Faith Leadership. It's at rippleoffaith.com. And there's also a YouTube site where we've got some. I recently just had 3 songs published on Spotify or released on Spotify. I didn't sing them. I can't sing but I wrote the lyrics and music and hired somebody else to sing them. But that's a YouTube Ripple of Faith /Ripple of Faith. But Ripple of Faith Leadership, rippleoffaith.com. There you can get access to all the materials and also the book, Ripple of Faith, The Ripple of Faith. And then you can listen to the music. If you search, on Spotify or iTunes, you have to search David Allen Petrash. Because when I posted them or got them released, I realized that I found out there's already a guy named David Petrash who has a lot of music on Spotify, and it ain't me. I didn't even know there was another David Petrash. I'm like, I wonder if we're related.
That's the fun of the internet. Yeah, I'll make sure to put the correct link, but I'll put links in the show notes. David, this has been wonderful. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your story. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been a blessing to be able to be on here, and you have a wonderful day, sir.
Absolutely.